KoshienCast, the only show where we wish we didn't have to watch Minami Kamakura and waste time not playing Zelda. My name is Matt, and joining me today is a very special guest, Matt.
That's me.
Hey, welcome to the show, as usual, Matt.
Oh, thank you. Although, I don't know if I can be included in that first-person plural, since I am still, much to my angst and frustration, not playing Zelda.
True, but you do wish you were playing Zelda instead of watching Minami Kamakura.
I mean, whenever I'm watching Minami Kamakura, I'm wishing I'm doing almost anything else.
Fair enough. I know what you mean. So, for those of you just joining us, we are... I don't know what I meant by that, but we are on week 10 of the winter season, covering all sports anime from the 5th to the 11th of March. So, just one quick announcement. So, this week, in lieu of doing Teekyu, we are doing its spin-off series, Takamiya, Nasuno, Desu, which just translates to, I am Nasuno, Takamiya.
Right.
And next week, we are going to be covering the other spin-off series to Teekyu, Usakame.
Right.
So, cool. Anything you'd like to add?
I don't think I have anything. Let's just jump into Yowamushi Pedal.
Okay, cool. Sounds good to me. Alright, so this episode, we join Sohoku back again. Episode pretty much focuses on that particular team. We get introduced to two new characters who are attempting to join the club. Danchiku, who is very silent, and then we also have his buddy, Kaburagi, who's a very talkative first year and who doesn't believe in Oda's... Well, doesn't believe Onoda is Onoda.
Right.
And what happens is we get the... basically, since Sohoku won the Inter-High last year, they have a whole host of new recruits to the club. And so they're going to be doing their famed first-year race in just a few weeks, where they're going to compete and see who... You know, it's just kind of like a fun ride, but... Essentially what happens was Danchiku and Kaburagi agreed with Teshima and Aoyagi that if they scored first and second in the first year race, then they would be allowed to ride in the Inter-High. But however, what we also find out is that
Sugimoto?
Sugimoto. I could not think of his name there, and I was trying to find it. Sugimoto has also decided to join the first year race, despite being a second year, because he really wants to prove himself to the team, and because, he really has not been trying hard enough. He's really not that great of a racer, but so he wants to prove himself to the team and prove that he can be, just as vital a member of the team. And what we discover is, and so basically have the three main racers in that race, Sugimoto, Danchiku, and Kaburagi. And that pretty much concludes the episode.
Well, yeah, so they don't actually do much of the race itself. So they just sort of get it started. They get into the area. They have to take some time to get through the city. And then they get into the open area where there aren't as many traffic signals, and they're able to actually begin racing. And that's where Danchiku and Kaburagi sort of pull ahead.
Right. There's this whole incident where, during that whole section, where Sugimoto has to kind of race ahead to keep some other first years from racing on ahead, because, they really want to win the race, and so, they kind of want to ignore the rules. And Sugimoto kind of declines their offer to kind of cheat a little bit with them. So, Matt, thoughts on this episode?
I thought it was kind of all over the place.
You
didn't... I mean... You mentioned the important parts of the plot and made it seem like this episode was coherent, which I appreciate, but it had about 6 or 7 different plot threads that had about 2 minutes each.
Right. So at the beginning of the episode, we have Imaizumi and Naruko have this whole interaction about Imaizumi coming up to Naruko and being like, so you've made your decision, right? About like you are training you're training as an all-rounder now, right?
Well, he doesn't even say that. He doesn't even call him.
Oh, he doesn't?
Well, no, he just says, like, you've done what you had to do, right? And Naruko's like, yes, I have. And then Onoda thinks back about, well, Naruko sure has been working hard, as opposed to the other times when he's been slacking off. Like, I mean, when in this show, when they talk about, like, oh, such and such sure has been working hard, I don't know how to take it seriously, because when aren't they?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is true, especially because didn't Naruko say something about having, like, a new technique he's going to unveil, or he has, like, a special something?
Yeah, I mean, it was unclear and uninteresting.
Right.
But it included the fact that he briefly they had to have a conversation about Naruko getting a different hairstyle, where he slicks it all the way back, and then they had to mess it up. Like, I don't know what any of that accomplished, but...
I mean, I guess it's a little bit more of a slice of life, kind of a little bit of a comedic interlude in between, the Hakone race and the first year race, as it were.
I guess, but what was more inexplicable was a second brief plot point between Teshima and Aoyagi.
Oh, yeah.
So at one point, apropos of nothing, Teshima and Aoyagi walk into the club room by themselves and say to each other, well, Teshima says to Aoyagi, sometimes we won't be able to say everything we want to say in front of our juniors. And now that we're third years, whenever that happens, we always have this. And then he pulls out a single pair of gloves, which have somebody took a Sharpie and wrote the words victory on the back. And they each take one of the gloves and put them on and then grasp each other's hands.
Right.
And that's the whole scene. That's it. That's all they do. And there's no explanation for where these gloves came from. Clearly, it's some kind of callback to when they had to work so hard to get on the team in the first place. But they're totally unironic about how silly it is for someone to be carrying around a sacred pair of gloves for hand-holding when they can't talk to their juniors. What does that even mean? What are they even talking about?
And, I mean, we've kind of touched on this a little bit last episode about the whole, forced, symbolism of the water bottle of Minami.
Yeah.
And it kind of falls into that same category where, okay, we need to have this sort of visual icon of these two characters' relationship.
Yeah.
And we have to make it seem like it represents this great, deep bond between these two characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because, frankly, how else are we going to sell merch? We want to sell cosplay gear. We want to be, so people can dress up as their characters, wear that glove, that symbolic glove, sorry. And, it's yeah, no, that's the icon. That's what speaks to me about Teshima and Aoyagi. And it's you guys have, the funny thing is, they've already done the work on their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to have, this sort of symbolic gesture between the two of them that really kind of comes from nowhere.
No, I agree. It was totally all over the place, lots of little nonsense, and it didn't really build up any character that much on their own, aside from introducing the new ones, who themselves aren't that interesting. They're just very passionate. So, the deal that Kobaragi offers when the first day he joins the club, he says, once we do the first year race, if me and Donchiku get first and second, you'll put us on the team. And then Teshima just says, okay. Even though they're the first two members who've joined and he's never seen them ride before, he just says, okay, I'll put you both on the team if you get first and second. So obviously that says to me that they won't get first and second. They can't, because we already have 5 of the 6 members who have to be on it. So is this going to be next episode where Teshima has some all-knowing monologue where he says, I knew Sugimoto had it in him and he was going to pull ahead. There was never any risk of anyone else getting first place. Yeah.
What I could see possibly happening is maybe only one of them gets first. One of them will get first, but Sugimoto will throw a wrench in their plans. But that's also going to be weird because the promise was so that if they get first and second place, so are they just going to give it to the first place guy and just sort of throw Sugimoto to the curb then?
Well, I don't know. I think it would be kind of weird if Sugimoto does actually end up on the team, because then they don't introduce any new characters to the Inner High squad.
Right.
So I have to assume... My assumption, honestly, is that there's some secret first year who they haven't introduced yet who's going to surprise everybody. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. At the same time, the series is never been good about setting up, like, mystery characters like that. Like, I mean... Let me put it like this. They could have easily done something like that during the Inter-High, and it was basically all about Mitotsuji and then the entire Hakone team.
Well, yeah, they did have that one... They tried to have the evil racer who manipulated the crowds, but then he just lost and wasn't that big a deal at the end.
Yeah, basically. It was only like a couple episodes. It wasn't really like... He wasn't really like a major villain.
Yeah. I mean, we can say that because we can't even remember his name.
Yeah, pretty much. He was not an important character. And so that's kind of why I'm hesitant to say...
That they'll do something interesting?
Yeah, kind of. A little bit.
Alright, well, I guess we'll take it as it comes.
Real quick, just one... I just want to end on at least a positive note with it. Okay. I did get a good chuckle about the joke with Onoda, who was apparently... he was accidentally being like an intimidating second year.
Oh, yeah.
I did get a couple laughs out of the fact that every time he was trying to be encouraging and, like, kind-hearted, he always came off as exceedingly confrontational.
Well, yeah, he doesn't know how to be a senpai, so...
Right. I mean, it's a cheap gag, but, I got a few laughs out of it.
Yeah, and the part of that made sense to me was that because he was the national champion, everyone was intimidated by him, because you have to imagine a lot of these people only went to that school because they won the Inter-High. Right. So they're super intimidated by Onoda anyway.
Right, exactly. So, I thought that aspect was at least a little interesting, but, it's still not much. But if you want to talk about something interesting, why don't we talk about March Comes In Like a Lion?
Alright. Decent. So this is March Comes In Like a Lion, episode 21. The focus here is, again, on Shimada. The first half of the episode has Shimada and Rei and Nikaido going to Yamagata, Shimada's hometown, for a shogi tournament / festival that I guess has been going on for several years. Shimada, of course, is the guest of honor, and he's trying to get out of the funk. He still goes into it pretty depressed and ashamed about getting swept out of the Lion King tournament. But he goes anyway. The festival starts off with human shogi, where Nikaido and another character they play a shogi match, but real people play as the pieces. And then a bunch of the pro shogi players, including Shimada, do a group shogi competition against local citizens.
Right.
It comes out that Shimada had actually set up a shogi club for the elderly in town because they were getting snowed in, not getting supplies, not having community, and he's gone out of his way to support them and pay for their groceries. And so Rei learns a lot of this through a reporter, and then they just sit around and talk about how cool Shimada is. And then at the end of that section, the folks from Shimada's hometown reassure him that it doesn't matter that he lost, that they'll always be there, they'll always support him, and he doesn't need to feel so much pressure to rush into being a master. Right. The second half of the episode is focused on the sisters and their grandfather, who have an extended debate about what the appropriate filling would be for a new Japanese pastry that they want to make and sell. They end up deciding on making pastries that look like snowmen with different fillings in each half, so the top ball has a different filling than the bottom, and they get mix and match. And then they talk about their mom for a little while, and at the end of the episode, Rei happens to be walking by their house when Hina calls him, and they invite him in, and they all eat together.
Right. So I thought this episode was kind of interesting. It was a little light, I'll say.
It was a lot light.
Well, fair enough. I thought what was most interesting about it was kind of the contrast between Rei and Hina, because I kind of saw this episode as both the characters almost sort of going back to their roots. So for like the entire point I kind of saw of the live action shogi match was kind of a reminder that shogi is kind of meant to be a representation of an actual battle. Because, I mean, that's what, like, shogi and, like, chess, for example, they're war games.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of saw that as sort of a return to the roots, while the whole thing with Hina was, she was kind of trying to go back to the roots, they're kind of trying to go back to what made their restaurant popular not their restaurant, their bakery in the first place. And, that was, something that their mother had come up with, their special design that they have for their signature pastry there. And we kind of got more of a direction for both characters, what with Rei kind of seeing through Shimada and his whole goal of, he has kind of a other purpose beyond just shogi.
Right.
Like, he kind of finds meaning in, like, helping out these elderly people, kind of taking them to and from their house, and he kind of lost sight, that's what he was trying to do in the first place. And I think Rei has a little bit more of a direction now to understand, like, okay, I need to be focusing more on the people I do care about, which is why we had that whole sequence of the surprise that he was actually just standing right outside the girl's apartment, because I believe that's the first time he's actually initialized, like, going to see them himself.
Well, I'm not sure that he was going to see them. That wasn't totally clear if he was going to see them or if he just happened to be walking by. Maybe he was.
My impression was that he was... It was the camera angling was kind of weird because the way he was standing did look like he was kind of walking by, like handing to his side. At the same time, he was kind of stopped.
Yeah,
also in front of their house.
Yeah, also it's not necessarily like they're right on his route to get home.
Right, exactly. So, I don't know. I kind of took that as maybe he was kind of, like, trying to work up the courage to actually go inside.
Yeah, that makes more sense instead of... Because I took it as a random coincidence, and I'm like, well, that's kind of lazy, but obviously I just wasn't thinking about it.
Right. Well, because the other thing was that, if you recall, he actually has, like, a bunch of gifts for them with him.
Yeah, and again, that makes a lot more sense than what I was thinking.
That's fair. So I kind of feel like that's kind of the first step for Rei actually, like, trying to do something with the sisters.
Yeah.
It's kind of him sort of coming to accept that these girls are a very important part of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, we kind of have more of a direction for Hina now as well. She wants to kind of take on the role of her mother. She wants to keep working at the bakery because she does really enjoy it, and she wants to work side by side with her grandfather. So this does kind of put an interest, like, how is the series going to end now? Because next week is the last episode.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. I don't really know how you develop, like, Rei has developed to a place where it seems, the last few episodes was he's been supporting Shimada. It seemed like he's been the one providing something instead of needing something. Most of the show, he's been the one who's needed support, and now he's providing support. So that seems to sort of be an end of an arc for him.
Right.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it ends. Maybe it just ends by setting up season 2.
Perhaps, because I mean there is that aspect of it because it is an ongoing manga.
Right. Yeah.
So
the story.
I don't think we're going to get yeah, exactly. It's not going to be... I don't think it's going to be a definitive ending. I think it's going to be kind of a vague-ish, like, oh, it's over. Like, this story arc is over. But, kind of leave it open because we do have more to cover, possibly.
Yeah, we definitely have more to cover.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is probably more certainly the end of Shimada's arc because he got some real resolution where he was able to sort of reset, realize that, the people in his life didn't hate or resent him for losing, and he's able to say, like, well, it's going to be spring again, I can start over, and that's, that's not so bad.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like, I got another year, whatever. Like, it's time for it's kind of a time for me to kind of pick up the pieces.
Yeah. So I can't imagine there'll be too much dwelling on Shimada. I don't know. I think if I were to guess, I'd say the last episode might have some resolution for Nikaido and Rei, maybe.
Right. That kind of, because I feel like we haven't got much of a resolution between the two, because Nikaido keeps showing up, and like he and Rei are kind of talking, and we kind of had that setup of the two of them becoming closer friends a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, but didn't really follow
where they
up.
kind of, yeah, and it's like we haven't really gotten that like conclusion yet.
Mm-hmm.
But I do kind of feel like the series is going to end with Rei moving in with the sisters. Like, I still think that's probably how it's going to end. Because they kind of set that up, too, with the whole fact, they kind of set that up, too, with the, we kind of skipped over this during the summary, but there's this whole thing about the girls who are really short on money, and, like, when they go out to get a snack and they go overboard, and they end up spending, like, 1,600 yen, which only equates to about, like, I think about, like, $12 or so, but, Akari is still kind of, like, mortified over how much they spent on it.
Right.
Because it's like, oh man, we're going to have to make ends meet now. Like, really, really make ends meet. So, we already know that Rei has a decent amount of money set aside because he only uses the bare minimum to survive. So, I'm wondering if that's going to be kind of his role for the girls. Like, he's going to be able to help them out and pay for, kind of help them survive.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I guess so. So, speaking of things we need to find out, All Out...
We need to find out?
We need to find out about All Out.
Okay. All right.
And
tell me about All Out.
I will. Okay. So, apparently, we get a follow-up with the Yoshida asking for the game with Ryoan. Ryoan agrees, but they kind of only agree on the basis that they're going to be sending out their second string.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's good enough, because, it's still, like, one of the best teams in the district. Even their second string is going to be pretty good. So, everybody is kind of... some people on the team are a little miffed with Gion for kind of starting up this rivalry. But... we kind of get also we kind of get a little bit of a slice of life with the other guy. We kind of find out a little bit more about the team, about this tradition they have, about playing rock, paper, scissors to see who goes to the bath first. And there's kind of a weird twist of fate where Shingo wants to join, and Sekizan basically has to back down and go get the other boys. And then we also get... the real meat of this episode comes from a discussion between Oharuno and a character by the name of Suwa, who wants to really... basically, he kind of resents Oharuno because he's so incredible. He's got all this natural talent, and Suwa, like, gets annoyed with Oharuno because of how, like, blasé he acts towards him. Or kind of reacts to the fact about how good he is. And they kind of have this very long discussion about, Sua's whole problem isn't even so much the fact that he's hyper-talented, but, he has the gall to tell him, like, you just need to work harder. It's just like, yeah, you know what, I've seen other people who work really hard. Some people turn out fine, and some people don't. Like, I've got really weak eyes, I don't exactly have the best build, and it's a real struggle for me to actually, like, even keep up with everybody. And Oharuno kind of ends the conversation by telling him about, like, there's this, like, the captain of the all-Japanese team, who's kind of very similar to Suwa, but, he kind of he kind of does what he can. He's not a particularly talented guy. That sort of ends the conversation. Suwa and him sort of make up, and then Suwa goes out to keep training.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are a couple other small things I skipped over, but I'd say that's largely the meat of the episode.
Yes.
So I thought this was an alright episode. It kind of feels like a bit more of a setup episode for the very end of the season. for the big game against the Rio and second string, they did kind of set up this whole thing about how they want to... Basically, they want to try and bring out the first string through their play. That's kind of their goal for this game.
Yeah, well, that's going to happen to some degree.
Right, probably. I think this is a good moment to also set up Ryoan for Hanazono, because I really like the fact that they are... Like, this gets so, skimmed over in so many sports series, including, good sports series. Where... you have these giant teams, and they're always set... you only get a look at their top-tier players.
Oh, yeah.
You only get a... there's always kind of this implied, no, they're this giant school with this whole... with this gigantic team of, swarms of players, and it's
And here's 5 of them.
Yeah, basically. We get to know 5 of them, we get to know the 5 very best. Here, it's okay, great. So, this is a great way to set up this team. Show how good they are, just their second string. I am shocked that very few other series have attempted to do something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have, the champion team, and, just showing, the people who got passed over for them.
Yeah.
For, the main team. And I really like what they're going to be doing here with that.
Well, so on second thought, it may be something where Jinko has to realize that the second string is still so good that they can't... That just because they're the second string doesn't mean that they can be taken lightly, and the first string doesn't come in. And so they have to realize how much work they still have to do, because even the second string was better than them.
Right, exactly. And that was kind of my thought. You could take this in a couple different directions. You can take it in that direction. You can take it into a direction of how, the comparison between how hard they have to work just to bring in the first string players, and then when they come in, you get to see just how monstrous this team is.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are a bunch of different ways you can go about that. I appreciate how much they're kind of keeping the formula open.
Something I didn't necessarily appreciate about this episode, we're pretty close to the end of this season, and they're still introducing characters on the main team.
Yeah.
For me personally, there's nothing wrong with having some background characters who don't get their own significant development.
Right.
Because you need that. Not every character can get their own arc, especially when you have a team of, 30 people.
Right.
But they felt the need to have Haruno have this moment with another character who we've never really had that much interaction with. And the same goes for the beginning of the episode, with Gion taking lessons from a couple of senpai who I don't know if we know why we care about them.
Yeah, it's it was Kasuga was his name. And it was, because I specifically wrote it down because I was are we supposed to know who Kasuga is?
Exactly. Why are we treating this guy like he has an established character and we know why he always acts so pissed off or something?
Right, exactly. And it's I appreciate that we're kind of getting a little education about, Gion and, well, not necessarily Gion, but kind of his role and his big weakness.
What's a flanker supposed to do?
Right.
But,
and, I appreciated that lesson, but at the same time, it's I assumed Kasuga at first was a member of a different team.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my issue.
That's what gets me is, would that section have been any less informative and useful if Sekizan had been the one giving instruction? Or anyone else, Ibumi, anybody who was well established, instead of having to simultaneously build up a functionally new character and give information about how rugby is supposed to work and what the flanker does.
Right. And yeah, that part didn't work. It's been a bit of a weakness of the series, of just having such a gigantic cast and insisting that we need to know them all. I know the names of the other schools, like Ryoan and Keijo, and of course Tenjiku, but I couldn't tell you the names of anybody at this point. I don't even remember the name of who was the main guy on, Tenjiku anymore. And that was just, a couple episodes ago. I could go back and listen to the episodes. I'm sure I said his name, but I don't remember it anymore.
Rinpei.
Yeah, there you go. I know you're probably just looking at the notes,
hey,
but...
Don't give away my secrets. This is audio only. Nobody needs to know that. I knew I'd recognize it when I saw it.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
But the same goes for Oharino's development with Soa. So, like, this, or Sua, who cares? His name doesn't matter. Which I was a little more okay with it because he was just there to be a stand-in for Oharino's brother, because this is this recurring thing where Oharino feels guilty about his brother quitting rugby and he feels responsible for it, and so it sort of was reiterating some of the things he'd heard about, like, oh, it's not fair, you have natural talent, I just suck, I don't want to play when people who don't have to work as hard can just do it easily. And Oharino, one, is frustrated, like, you just do the best you can, like, you know, you're only responsible for doing what you can do. You don't get to, like, complain that someone else is better. It's worthwhile to just do your best. And two, you don't get to decide that other people have it easier or other people are natural talents, because, and of course that's reinforced at the end when he goes outside to run and he sees, oh, even Ibumi's out here running. I thought he was a natural talent, but it turns out he has to work hard too. So it's not that complex or deeply interesting, because it just reinforces this really critical lesson that working hard is good,
right,
which I don't know if that needs to be reinforced.
And I mean, that's the thing. Even if you wanted to do that, kind of going back to what you were kind of saying before, again, why do we need this character Sua to do it?
Right.
Like, we already have, we already just had that one character just last episode who spends time at night practicing. Like,
Kifune.
What? Yeah, Kifune. Why don't we just do that?
Yeah.
Like, why not just make that character Kifune? You already put in the effort of introducing him.
I don't know.
But, yeah, it's like, and not only that, but what you were saying there about establishing the whole, like, work hard is good. Like, it is kind of retreading old ground. Just because, like, I mean, that's been what this entire series is called. I mean, it's called All Out because it's about the people going all out.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. There wasn't really a lot that was interesting outside of the setup for the Ryoan game.
Mm-hmm.
I still do enjoy All Out. It still was probably one of the highlights of this week, but...
Oh, yeah. It's always a highlight, but this was not the best episode of All Out.
Right.
Speaking of something else that didn't have its best episode, do you want to discuss Tiger Mask?
Oh, I guess.
All right. Fun time. So, Tiger Mask episode 22. Fukuwara Mask decides that he wants to host a wrestling tournament in his hometown.
Sure.
To revitalize it, because that's a recurring thing. Wrestling can revitalize a local economy just like that.
Yeah.
So he decides to recruit a bunch of pro wrestlers. He manages to force Haruna as Spring Tiger and Tiger Mask to participate, because he tells Haruna that he and he alone realized her secret identity as Spring Tiger, and he holds that over her head. So she participates, and a couple people from New Japan Pro Wrestling randomly show up, and it becomes a big, exciting tournament. Nobody there recognizes Haruna, even after she talks using her normal voice. Everyone says to herself, boy, that girl sure is familiar. Oh well. Including Tiger Mask / Naoto, someone who lives with and talks to her every day, does not recognize her voice, or face, or hair, or anything. Anyway, they have a tournament, and they promise that the fan favorite who wins the most valuable wrestler will win 10 million yen. That's what Fukuwara Mask promises. So Haruna participates in a match with some female wrestlers, and she loses. Milk manages to pin Haruna because Haruna is not a professional wrestler and she doesn't know what she's doing. The main event is Fukuwara Mask and Tiger Mask versus Naito and Evil, who are other actual real-life Japanese wrestlers who drove a truck with the ring there in order to make fun of the people for having such a dumb tournament. And then once they show up, they say, well, I might as well wrestle in this tournament. They drag Tiger Mask and Fukuwara Mask around to food stalls and throw food at them, and then end up back in the ring. Somehow, despite all that, they lose the match.
Well, naturally.
It turns out that Fukuwara Mask stuffed the ballot box, and he won the most valuable wrestler and the non-existent prize money. But he actually wrestled so well that everyone wanted him to win anyway, and then everyone went home. The end.
So, you brought this to my attention earlier. Well, why don't you just go ahead and bring it up? The reason for this episode, most likely.
Well, I did see today that there's a big match coming up in real-life New Japan Pro Wrestling featuring a tag team of Naito and Evil. So they're a tag team in real life. They're one of the hot commodities in New Japan Pro Wrestling. So they're probably just getting some more exposure to reinforce some upcoming events that they have.
Yeah, basically. So this entire episode was really just meant to be a kind of roundabout way to get some marketing going on for their big match.
Yeah, because it added nothing to the plot. Nobody...
Right.
Like, the only thing it added, I think, is that Fukuwara Mask knows who Spring Tiger is. Which, okay.
Yeah, great. Like, who cares? Like...
I mean, the only way that that's important to me is if the greatest fan theory is true, and Fukuwara Mask is, in fact, Tiger the Great the Third.
You mean the fan theory that we came up with?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we're fans. I mean, we're not fans of Tiger Mask, but we're fans of other stuff, and we have a theory. But yeah, no, I'm convinced that the whole thing was just a setup for that piece of information, and it's going to come up in like 10 episodes when Tiger the Great the Third reveals that he knows who Spring Tiger is because he's also Fukuwara. He's gonna take off his Tiger Mask, and the Fukuwara Mask is gonna be on underneath it.
Oh my god, that will be the best.
And like, ignore the fact
because we already know what he looks like too.
Exactly. You have to ignore the fact that they have completely different body types. I'm willing to believe that in one of those forms they're wearing like Fukuwara Mask is wearing a bodysuit with extra fat on it.
Oh, I'm sure that's what the case is. Yeah. And I want so desperately. We need to look up and see who the voice actor is for Fukuwara Mask and for Tiger the Great the Third.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I don't want to because I know we're wrong. I'm just going to live in this delusion.
Right, until it's finally revealed who he is.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're never going to know why Fukuwara Mask took his mask off.
Well, we saw him again at the very end of the episode, because we saw, like, that man walking into the restaurant happily and calmly, and I think the idea was that was supposed to be Fukuwara Mask.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because it looked kind of like how I remember him looking before.
Yeah. No, I'm sure you're right.
One highlight I would like to point out is that there was a moment in this episode where Evil and Naito basically they basically rushed Fukuwara Mask and Tiger Mask outside of the stadium.
Yeah.
And began to assault them with food, and not particularly like dangerous food. We're talking about like throwing their faces in cotton candy and throwing messy noodles all over them.
Yeah, that was very confusing.
Yeah, I don't quite understand. What was even more confusing was that the fact that Naito at one point drags Fukuwara back to the ring. And rather than Tiger Mask rushing to stop him, he decides to take a moment to hose off. Because Lord forbid that he, like, be messy before he run back into the ring and save, and save his partner.
And what got me is, where did the guy he was fighting go? Evil.
Yeah, like, why is he not dealing with Tiger Mask?
He's just letting him pause and take a shower? Yeah, it was something.
Yeah, it wasn't a great episode.
But at least it wasn't truly offensive, which this show has definitely done before.
Right. Well, don't forget we did have the episode, the moment in the hot springs with Haruna and the
Candy Pear.
Yeah, and Candy Pear talking about how Haruna has a great figure and how because of that she needs to get into wrestling.
Yeah.
Which is weird because they know who Haruna is.
Yeah, they know she's a wrestler, but she needs to get more into wrestling.
Like, I guess the idea was that she needs to stop being a promoter and just focus entirely on her wrestling, but gosh, that's such a weird transition.
Also, you just defeated her easily. Are you sure she needs to be a wrestler?
But she put up a good fight, Matt. Okay, all right,
whatever. I mean, there's literally 3 female wrestlers in Japan, apparently. So, speaking of females, do you want to discuss Minami Kamakura High School Girls Cycling Club, the animation?
I really don't, but I'm going to.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, so beginning of this episode, we find Hiromi receives her new frame, which apparently all the parts were donated by local cyclists at the cafe that Shiki's sister runs. And apparently all she had to do to get that was basically tell a bunch of dudes that a high school girl needed bicycle parts, which, And then they decide that what they need to do next as a not club is to go on a big trip.
Yeah.
And they they need to agree on a place that's simultaneously not too far away, but also kind of off the beaten path, someplace that they haven't gone before. And they decide to go to the Miura Peninsula. There's this incredibly awkward scene where Hiromi brings her handlebars with her in the bath.
Yeah.
Which kind of got overshadowed by the fact that for no particular reason, Sandy McDoodle decided to stop by her house and join her in the bath.
Yeah, so she just jumps in her bath completely naked because those Americans.
Yeah, those Americans just wanting to jump in the bath, I guess.
They have no sense for cultural mores, those Americans.
They have no decency, apparently.
I know.
Says a girl from a ranch in Colorado?
Yeah.
Anyway, we go into this whole thing where apparently they arrive at the Miura Peninsula, and Hiromi and Sandy are really excited to go to a park, and then that's sort of glanced over. Mm-hmm. And Sandy apparently has her own uniform now, because why not? And the girls just sort of ride around for a while. They decide that they're going to go to see Mount Fuji sometime because Kamakura has Mount Fuji, and apparently that has never come up in the show until now. And at the very end of the episode, Furuni falls asleep for about 10 minutes, and during that time, Shiki abandons them. And that's where the episode ends.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and then AOP segment, we find out where we can find some really delicious sweets in Kamakura.
It's definitely not an ad.
Definitely not an ad for Kamakura. Just, if you want to go to a scenic... you want to ride around Kamakura and go to a scenic viewpoint. Hey, there's this nice little cafe that sells, chocolate treats for only 1,000 yen.
Yeah.
They said the price. I don't remember if it was exactly 1,000 yen, but they said the price.
Yep. They were, given the menu.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
This episode was terrible.
There were just so many unexplainable things. I mean, this is what the show does, is it sets up a conflict and then immediately resolves it in a completely illogical way. So, we had a conflict early in the episode where they decided they wanted to go on a ride together during the day. Okay, that makes sense. That's normal. Right. Hiromi got a new bike. She wants to ride with her friends. Oh, but how are we going to do it? Because Sandy only has a mommy bike. I don't know.
Right.
What are we going to do? Well, I guess, Cat Lady says, well, I'll let you rent one of my road bikes for free if you buy travel bags so you can go on the train with your bikes from me. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, then how will we buy these travel bags? We don't have enough money. And then Shiki immediately says, well, lucky for you, because you won the night criterium, you get extra funding. Even though you're not an actual club, they decided to make an exception for you.
I just make them a club.
Yeah, like, is it why go through all the trouble of explaining that there's a special exception because you're all so special that you can now buy travel bags in order to rent a bike for your new member who may or may not be in the non-existent club? Like, it's so needlessly complex.
Right, like, I mean, so I guess the whole idea was that the author realized that he had to have some kind of conflict during, like, when he was writing the original manga. He had to have some kind of conflict. So his idea was, okay, so the club needs to, okay, so it's going to be that the club doesn't actually exist. They have to prove their worth. Okay, fine, whatever. However, he kind of runs into the roadblock of, okay, well, how are they actually going to, fund a lot of their activities? Because, shoot, I chose cycling as their activity, and it's super expensive.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're going to get funding anyway. But we can't also, just make them a club because that destroys the entire central conflict of the show. Which has still not really been delved into very much, because they basically are still just given everything.
Exactly. They might as well be a club. Like, the principal gave them a house.
Right.
How are they not, how is that easier than making them a club?
Yeah, why not just approve them? Because I guess she has to teach them some sort of weird, vague lesson about working hard, even though they have not worked hard once in this entire series.
They've just gotten everything for free.
Yeah, they've literally gotten everything for free, and then we just have a bunch of filler material of them riding around the town or occasional bath sequences, which I don't want to delve into too much, but... Yeah, I just want to address the fact, once again, why did Hiromi have her handlebars in the bath?
Because she just loves her new bike, Unico, so much.
Right, because now the bike has a name, similar to Pontycoon from Long Riders.
He's Unico because he's like a unicorn, but a bike.
Why? Because it has, a little light up in front? Mm-hmm. So it looks a little bit like a horn, but that pretty much applies to all their bikes.
Yeah, what bike doesn't have a light on the front?
Right, exactly. It's dumb, okay? There's no denying
the last thing that gets me, and you did mention it briefly, is that Sandy McDougal somehow has a team uniform, even though they got all these uniforms before Sandy was on the team. So presumably they would have just gotten 4. They're like, oh, how did Sandy get one? Well, we ordered an extra, just in case.
Just in case.
And you're like,
that
okay.
Was apparent.
Yeah, so you randomly got an extra jersey in the exact size so that it fits Sandy. You're not all identically sized people.
Right, and I mean, I'm just going to touch on this briefly here. Sandy is clearly more, she's curvier than you girls.
Yeah, and she's also taller than a lot of them. So
right, so, why did you think, just in case you got this taller, curvier girl on your team?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, it makes no sense if you think about it at all, which goes for most of this show.
Which kind of, to me, I guess, it really does show that this was a show that was written by a guy.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's okay, so, they ordered another team jersey. Do girls have different sizes than guys? It's fine.
It's normal sized.
Yeah, basically. And then, just real brief, I also want to touch upon the fact that their instructor stranded her girls in a completely, isolated city without any supervision.
Yeah, this is supposed to be a learning lesson, but what happens when you take them on a school event and then abandon them by themselves and say...
strange new city.
Exactly, and say, oh, well, getting lost is part of the fun. You're that does not sound responsible. That sounds like when terrible things happen to them, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, basically. And not only that, but Fuyone was only asleep for 10 minutes. Yeah. They had to have this conversation, which must have just lasted just a couple of minutes at the very least. Uh-huh. She's only been gone for about 5 minutes. I'm sure you guys can... if she just, bails on them... the other girls could be yeah, she went in that direction. I'm sure if we just, pedal pretty hard, we could probably catch up with her.
Nope.
Yeah, I know. It's stupid. And I mean, I know, but... I really hate this show in a way I don't... I don't know if I hate it more than Days, but it's up there.
Well, if we hate it that much, we can move on to our final show. If you'd like to give me a description of the independent and totally standalone series, Takamiya Nasuno Desu.
Right. So, I mean, it's basically TQ Season 9 is what it is. Like, the girls are in actually several episodes anyway. Mm-hmm. Which is the funny thing, really the only difference is that now, Yuri's brother is now part of the mix. Mm-hmm. Yota. And then they also introduce Nasuno's mother, who is apparently also, like, a little girl. Which is, I mean, whatever.
I mean, her dad is Colonel Sanders, so...
And her dad is Colonel Sanders. Also a statue where she's like, oh, no, that's my dad. It's like, oh, the statue looks like your dad. No, it's my dad. Yeah. Hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
Wah!
Yeah. Yeah, good impersonation.
Yeah, thanks. I practiced really hard on it.
I can tell it paid off.
Right. And I mean, beyond that, I mean, it is basically just TQ. I mean, you get your general pretty decent gags, such as... I do appreciate the fact that Nasuno has to stretch her neck up to see Yoda in his room because she doesn't want to climb. Because Yoda's put up in a treehouse.
Yeah, and if she climbs the stairs, people will see her underwear, so she just stretches her neck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a funny visual, too.
Right, and then she rides up to Yoda in a carriage, in a pumpkin carriage, because it's a part of Cinderella. What that has to do with anything, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then there's some other... there's a pretty decent gag in, like, episode 4 where Kanai gets stabbed in the head and doesn't seem to really mind. I mean, this is definitely a season, though, where it does kind of feel like they're starting to kind of stretch it a little bit thin.
Yeah.
Like, they have this very recurring gag with... so... The way that Nasuno travels around is that an eagle grabs her by her ribbon that she wears on her head in this, like, exclusively in this season, and basically, like, grabs her and just flies her around, just, like, straight by the head. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, it's a funny visual gag at first, and it's kind of funny when they bring it back, just, like, as being just like, oh yeah, no, it's no big deal, that's just what Nasuno does. Mm-hmm. But then they kind of do it again in later parts of the season, and they're still kind of, like, reacting to it, and it's like... This is kind of beneath you guys.
Mm-hmm. I think the show works best when the girls from TQ are around because their vibe of playing off each other is fun. It's also kind of funny to see because Yota serves the whole season as the straight man effectively, which is usually Yuri's role. So it's funny to see the episode that have the TQ girls. Yuri shows up, and then she's also a gag character playing off Yota, so she's not played straight, which I thought was kind of fun.
Yeah, that was a little clever, and they kind of addressed that because she mentions, like, oh, I'm on break. It's your role.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was a pretty, like, funny little cheeky way of doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny because I think out of the girls, I'm kind of, Nasuno and Konoe are I'm kind of split between which are my favorite. It's kind of like choosing your favorite Skittle, admittedly. But it's like, they would probably be my favorite of the girls because they probably have the most defined personality. So, I definitely think it worked, like, following Nasuno works as a spin-off. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like, why not just make another season of TQ? Because that's basically what this is.
Yeah, I think they might have wanted to do it just so they have one continuous story, insofar as it's a story from beginning to end.
Except they even have an episode later on where it's like Yoda is basically not in an episode or two, and it's basically just the girls going around and doing, like, their normal thing because Nasuno buys an ice rink.
Right. So they kind of got bored partway through the show, maybe.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it feels like at times. There is a great episode where they actually bring back something that's referenced, where Nasuno, where, like, there are apparently a bunch of evil organizations that are after Nasuno,
yeah.
Which they kind of like drop that immediately, but they actually have an episode about that where one of the head of Madness captures Nasuno, and you find out he's a certified lifeguard because Nasuno keeps doing things that are getting her killed.
Yeah.
But somehow she pops out all right. At the very end of the episode just ends with her head exploding. Just because, like, nothing really happens. It's just they're walking along and her head explodes. Which, you know, I mean, again, it's funny, but, like, I am kind of, it's like, I really do enjoy TQ, but I am kind of looking forward to getting our last spin-off next week.
Yeah. It was impressive that this season, though, was somehow even less about sports than TQ.
And I mean, really, isn't that what you want out of TQ, is basically the season that's not about sports?
Yeah, right. Anyway, I think that wraps us up for this week.
Yeah, I think it does. I appreciate you joining me, as always, Matt.
Yes, it's my pleasure.
Would you please hit the credits?
I do it every week or so.
Our logo design is by James Ratcliffe. The theme music is Fly High by Burnout Syndromes, covered and performed by Luke Bartka. You can follow KoshienCast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and our email is kosiencast@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We will be back next week with the best and worst from the world of sports anime, and until then, keep training.